Welcome to Citizen Impact. I am your host, Logan Martinez. Citizen Impact is a project of the Miami Valley Full Employment Council, an advocacy group here in Dayton fighting for jobs and people's rights. We have an exciting show starting this new year and looking at some really hard times, and we're getting ready to be part of the big fight back against all the attacks. Last year, us and the National Jobs for All Coalition, in conjunction with a lot of local groups, unions, churches, community groups, sponsored a town hall meeting with Representative John Conyers. It was very successful, and we're going to be moving this this year into really sort of highlighting the whole jobs issue and its relationship to economic justice. And we're starting it off this year with a very important subject of unemployment benefits here in Ohio. We have Matt Smith with the Ohio AFL CIO. Matt, thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Unemployment is, even though it's down from what it has been, it continues to be a major problem here in Ohio and around the country. Even though the numbers have gone down, there's still literally millions and millions of people nationwide that are unemployed. The numbers, the official numbers, don't really reflect the real number. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But here in Ohio, the legislators have decided they're going to try to cut benefits to the unemployed. And can you tell us what they're talking about doing, Matt?
Yeah, again, Logan, thank you so much for having me here tonight. I really appreciate it. You're right. Unemployment is a huge issue still in this nation, and Ohio is no different. In Ohio, what's happening right now, Barbara Sears from the Toledo area, she has introduced a bill, it's House Bill 394, that will drastically cut unemployment benefits for folks who need assistance the most. And what this bill will actually do is, as I know that you're fully aware, Ohioans qualify for 26 weeks of unemployment benefits. And what this, one of the major pillars of this bill is cutting those weeks from 26 down to 12. And they've actually introduced a sliding scale. So depending on what the unemployment rate is, folks would either qualify for 12 weeks up to possibly 20 weeks. And what that looks like is if unemployment rate is below 5%, like it is today, Logan, then you or I, if we were laid off through no fault of our own, we would only qualify for 12 weeks of benefits. Now, let's say the unemployment rate was above 9%, so we're talking about catastrophic unemployment in the state. Then folks would qualify for 20 weeks. So regardless of what the unemployment rate is, what this legislator, Barbara Sears, is trying to do is at least cut the weeks, benefit weeks, by 6, and as much as 14 weeks. And that's really not the right way to go. In Ohio, we do have an insolvent unemployment compensation fund. And it's not because of workers. Workers didn't cause that fund to go broke. What has caused that fund to go broke is that businesses have paid too little into the system for far too long. In Ohio, employers pay on an employee's first $9,000 of earnings, and that's called the taxable wage base. And that taxable wage base is just far too low. The national average for a taxable wage base is around $13,400. And that $9,000 amount hasn't changed since 1995. So it hasn't changed in over 20 years. So businesses over the last 20 years, they just haven't paid enough into the fund, and that's what caused the fund to go broke during the Great Recession, and it caused Ohio to borrow, $2 billion from the federal government.
Now, sort of to personalize this a little bit, because we went through, and the newspapers here in Ohio and Dayton has shown that the foreclosure rate is down.
Yes.
But one of the things that happens has happened literally to tens of thousands of people in Ohio here is they've lost their home. Mm-hmm. And one of the big factors is unemployment. Yeah. They lose their jobs, they keep their mortgage payments going for a while, and then people lose their homes. So the impact of losing these benefits means that that's going to happen more often, and it's going to happen to more people.
Yeah, we actually So they've had 5 hearings on the bill so far, and a couple weeks ago, right before Christmas, a painter from Southeast Ohio came in and really told his story of how unemployment compensation saved his family. He was laid off, extended layoff during the Great Recession, and the only thing that kept them in their home was unemployment benefits. So to reduce that from 26 to 12, you're absolutely right. You're going to see more foreclosures. You're going to be, you'll see more cars repossessed. You'll see more high schoolers not being able to afford or go to college because their parents, benefits have been cut. And we're not talking about lavish benefits. We're talking about, $350 to $420 depending.
Sometimes it's a lot less than that. It's 50%.
Absolutely.
And there's a ceiling to what you can receive, but a lot of workers get benefits of $250.
Exactly. Yep.
Out of that, and and that's after making a real living, and you can get by on that sort of if you don't have too high of payments on things, or if you don't have a medical bill.
Right.
If you have a medical bill on top of that, you're going to be in real trouble.
Real trouble.
So they've decided to balance this shortfall on the backs of the workers and on the backs of people who are going to be in the future here laid off.
I mean, in total, yearly, they're talking about cutting benefits by about $475 million a year. And while they're doing that, they're actually reducing taxes on businesses by $313 million. So you're right. They're trying to balance this solvency issue solely on the backs of workers who have earned that benefit. I don't know about you, but a $475 million cut for workers, I mean, just imagine what that would do to our local economies.
Sure.
You hit it on the head earlier. People are going to lose their homes. People are going to lose their cars. They won't be able to put food on the table for some, in some instances. Another really bad provision in this bill, it actually cuts out what is known as the dependency piece, which is if you have 2 or 3 dependents, you actually get a few extra dollars more per week. There's a gentleman up that works at the Timken plant in the Canton area. And he has 3 dependents. So he gets, I think it's $65 more per week in order to feed his kids, which, it's extremely important. We got to keep food on the tables for these hardworking men and women, and for the state legislature to, like I said, cut benefits by $475 million and turn around and give $313 million to the businesses through a tax cut, that's preposterous.
Now, this has been an ongoing problem here. The unemployment benefits are part of the New Deal safety net. It was, they had it a little bit in the 20s, but during the Depression, they decided they needed really something to protect workers while they were out of a job. And so they came up along with the Social Security Act. Unemployment benefits were part of the Social Security Act. And it was designed to protect people in between the business cycle or if you were in a particular industry. And this has been ongoing, that they've cut away these benefits. Now, last year, the federal government refused, the House of Representatives, Representative Boehner, he's gone now, but one of his great accomplishments was he cut unemployment benefits for 75,000 unemployed workers in Ohio last year who were getting these extra weeks because, as people know, even though the recession is officially over, we are still seeing the hardship caused by it to lots and lots of people. And so this has been a pattern for them to cut these benefits, and our homeless shelters are filled up. We have high crime rate. Relatively, it's actually down, but it's still way too high, and it's all related to we have this ingrained poverty throughout Ohio and the country, and unemployment is one of the key things. Is there just aren't jobs for everybody, and
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point with the federal government cutting those extended weeks. You know, we, the Ohio AFL CIO, we've had several members come in and testify and talked about, you know, how those unemployment benefits really affect them. And one of the Republican legislators on the committee actually had the audacity to say, well, don't worry, if we cut your benefits down to 12 weeks, the federal government is going to swoop in and give you these lavish extended benefits, you know, up to 99 weeks. I don't know if they don't watch the news or you know what the case is there, but last year they cut those benefits; those are gone.
Oh, yeah.
And to think that they'll, you know, the federal government will just swoop in and start giving unemployed Ohioans unemployment benefits beyond those 12 weeks. You know, I don't know about you, Logan, but I don't trust the federal government to do too much right now.
No, well,
it's just complete gridlock.
No, and the notion is that's just fantasy cynicism from that lawmaker.
Yeah.
I would call it an outright lie, but maybe he didn't know. But he's certainly in the dark.
Well, it's certainly in the dark, and just it was a little heartless. It was a very moving testimony that he was responding to, and for him just to make a blanket notion like that when someone was really in need at a time, a low point in their life, you know, it was a little frustrating to watch it take place. That's for sure.
Sure. Now, this is an ongoing pattern of economic inequality, and we have a video here of Rouch that we're going to show that shows sort of graphically the inequality that exists and the impact, and we'll come back to this unemployment benefits because there's almost officially a 250,000 unemployed Ohioans right now, and this is supposed to be when it's good.
Right.
And everything's, and those figures, you know, it's really about twice that. But
well, and on that point, real quick, Logan, before we go to the video, a big part of this, it depends on what the statewide average of unemployment rate is, you know, what the unemployment rate is statewide. But you have pockets, you have urban areas, you have rural areas where the unemployment rate is sometimes double or triple what the statewide average is. Look at the African American population, or the veteran population, or the Latino population. Those populations actually, double, triple, sometimes quadruple what the statewide average is. And this legislation does nothing to help out those populations.
Sure, pushes them deeper down in the hole.
Deeper into poverty.
So let's see that video, and then we'll come back and frame this about like how the people out there watching this can get involved and help fight for real change.
Excellent. Yep.
Can we roll the video, Tim?
I saw recently that I can't get out of my head.
Here we go.
A Harvard business professor and economist asked more than 5,000 Americans how they thought wealth was distributed in the United States. This is what they said they thought it was. Dividing the country into 5 rough groups of the top, bottom, and middle 3 20% groups, they asked people how they thought the wealth in this country was divided. Then he asked them what they thought was the ideal distribution. And 92%, that's at least 9 out of 10 of them, said it should be more like this. In other words, more equitable than they think it is. Now that fact is telling, admittedly, the notion that most Americans know that the system is already skewed unfairly. But what's most interesting to me is the reality compared to our perception. The ideal is as far removed from our perception of reality as the actual distribution is from what we think exists in this country. So ignore the ideal for a moment. Here's what we think it is again. And here is the actual distribution. Shockingly skewed. Not only do the bottom 20% and the next 20%, the bottom 40% of Americans barely have any of the wealth. I mean, it's hard to even see them on the chart. But the top 1% has more of the country's wealth than 9 out of 10 Americans believe the entire top 20% should have. Mind-blowing. But let's look at it another way, because I find this chart kind of difficult to wrap my head around. Instead, let's reduce the 311 million Americans to just a representative 100 people. Make it simple. Here they are, Teachers, coaches, firefighters, construction workers, engineers, doctors, lawyers, some investment bankers, a CEO, maybe a celebrity or two. Now let's line them up according to their wealth. Poorest people on the left, wealthiest on the right, just a steady row of folks based on their net worth. We'll color code them like we did before based on which 20% quintile they fall into. Now let's reduce the total wealth of the United States, which was roughly $54 trillion in 2009, to this symbolic pile of cash. And let's distribute it among our 100 Americans. Well, here's socialism, all the wealth of the country distributed equally. We all know that won't work. We need to encourage people to work and work hard to achieve that good old American dream and keep our country moving forward. So, here's that ideal we asked everyone about. Something like this curve. This isn't too bad. We've got some incentive, as the wealthiest folks are now about 10 to 20 times better off than the poorest Americans. But hey, even the poor folks aren't actually poor, since the poverty line has stayed almost entirely off the chart. We have a super healthy middle class with a smooth transition into wealth. And yes, Republicans and Democrats alike chose this curve. 9 out of 10 people, 92%, said this was a nice, ideal distribution of America's wealth. But let's move on. This is what people think America's wealth distribution actually looks like. Not as equitable, clearly, but for me, even this still looks pretty great. Yes, the poorest 20 to 30% are starting to suffer quite a lot compared to the ideal, and the middle class is certainly struggling more than they were, while the rich and wealthy are making roughly 100 times that of the poorest Americans and about 10 times that of the still healthy middle class. Sadly, this isn't even close to the reality. Here is the actual distribution of wealth in America. The poorest Americans don't even register. They're down to pocket change, and the middle class is barely distinguishable from the poor. In fact, even the rich between the top 10 and 20 percentile are worse off. Only the top 10% are better off. And how much better off? So much better off that the top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart at this scale. And the top 1%, this guy, well, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher than we can show. Here's his stack of cash, restacked, all by itself. This is the top 1% we've been hearing so much about. So much green in his pockets that I have to give him a whole new column of his own, because he won't fit on my chart. 1% of America has 40% of all the nation's wealth. The bottom 80%, 8 out of every 10 people, or 80 out of these 100, only has 7% between them. And this has only gotten worse in the last 20 to 30 years. While the richest 1% take home almost a quarter of the national income today, in 1976, they took home only 9%, meaning their share of income has nearly tripled in the last 30 years. The top 1% own half the country's stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. The bottom 50% of Americans own only 0.5% of these investments, which means they aren't investing. They're just scraping by. I'm sure many of these wealthy people have worked very hard for their money, but do you really believe that the CEO is working 380 times harder than his average employee? Not his lowest paid employee, not the janitor, but the average earner in his company. The average worker needs to work more than a month to earn what the CEO makes in 1 hour. We certainly don't have to go all the way to socialism to find something that is fair for hardworking Americans. We don't even have to achieve what most of us consider might be ideal. All we need to do is wake up and realize that the reality in this country is not at all what we think it is.
Well, that sort of laid it out there. The top 1% has a quarter of the income and half the wealth. That's pretty rich.
That is pretty rich, yeah.
When I was growing up, they had this show, the Millionaire. It was a long time ago, and the guy was a philanthropist, and he gave out $1 million, and everybody thought, well, to become a millionaire was like the big deal.
Right.
And now that's not even a lottery win these days. But back to the unemployment, people that have absolutely nothing coming in after their 12 weeks of benefits. This is almost unthinkable that the people are that greedy, and we've asked this question over and again. What do they expect people to? I guess they expect people some of them to become homeless.
Well, they're really trying to squeeze blood from a turnip in this case. You mentioned it. Yeah, put yourself in the shoes of the unemployed worker. The only thing that's keeping you above water at that point, or keep you motivated and keep going, is the idea that your state is going to help keep you in your home or keep food on the table until you can find another job. That's the whole point of unemployment compensation benefits. And this idea that Ohio workers are sitting on their couch at home, drinking beer and eating Cheetos, milking the system, it's just not true. The average unemployed worker stays on unemployment for about 14.9 weeks. So not the full 26 weeks, as some of the legislators at the State House would like for you to believe.
Sure, but that's not because, that's because some of them are able to go back to work. They got laid off. It was either a seasonable layoff, or it was they have a skill that's remarkable. They can get a job fairly easy, but that's the people who are really lucky on unemployment benefits. There's a whole other side of that, to the people who run out when you're getting 26 weeks and have no hope. We know that here in Dayton we lost the truck and bus plant, and it was like roughly 3,000 workers, and then there was the suppliers. None of that came back. We have this glass plant. It's a non-union plant that's opening here, and they may have 600 or 700 people in there. We don't know. They're really unknown about the number of jobs they're creating, but they're not union jobs, and it's hard to tell how long that's going to last, Evan.
Yeah, and there are some companies, like the bus company that you mentioned earlier. Let's just take U.S. Steel up in Lorain County, or Republic Steel in Lorain County. Those steel workers work really hard for their money, but that industry, it's a very cyclical industry. Sometimes there's a lot of steel being made, sometimes there's not. And right now there's not as much steel being made in the United States as there once was. So they're actually idling 2 plants in Lorain County. I think it happened just last week. And those men and women who have been laid off, they deserve a fair chance at keeping their homes and putting food on the table. But those are the types of jobs, those men and women can't just go down the street and apply for another job. And here's why. When that new employer looks down their resume and sees that they are working for U.S. Steel or Republic, they know once that plant is back up and running that worker is going to go back to the plant.
Sure.
This bill, House Bill 394, is really going to hurt those types of workers. The Timken plant is another good example. If you work at the Timken plant and there's a slowdown and you are laid off through no fault of your own, and you try to go find another job, it's almost like a scarlet letter. When those employers see that's where you were working and they know why you were laid off, they know they're not going to go through the time of training you. They don't want to go through the expense of training you and getting you acclimated to that new position, because they know that you're going to go back to the plant for the good pay and the good benefits as soon as things ramp back up.
Sure. Oh yeah. Well, we've seen it over and over again where there's this unevenness in the recovery, and some people luck out for various reasons. Either they hustle harder or something, but they get a job and they have remarkable skills. They're much more personable or something. But then there's like the hardcore unemployed, and if you fall into these categories, you're an older worker We have a whole bunch of people who've, worked 30 years at a place and they're 48 years old, or worked 20 years and they're, 48 years old. They lose their job, then people don't want to hire them because, well, they're not as fast, they're not, they're not going to be there that long. Not that you're able to find some jobs that we're always encouraging people to keep looking, but there's, we have a big problem with people who are coming out of prisons. We have a lot of people with felons. We need jobs for all these people. GM had a program where they hired people right out of prison in the 60s because they needed workers. I mean, by the busload here in Dayton, they were hired. But you tell these guys, well, hang in there, be good, don't do anything to get yourself in trouble. But how do you do that for year after year, and there's you don't even get called for an interview or anything ever?
Right. Well, and you mentioned the older population. Another one of the more egregious parts of this bill, it's actually a Social Security offset for your unemployment benefits. So let's just say that you are an older worker. You worked 30, 40 years, you paid all that money into Social Security, but it wasn't enough after you retired. You had to go back to work. So now you're back at work. Let's just say you get laid off through no fault of your own, and you expect that you will collect unemployment benefits. Well, what this bill does, if you collect that Social Security retirement benefit, it will actually reduce your unemployment benefits by the amount that you earn through your Social Security. And we would be the only state in the nation, the only state in the United States that would have this type of provision in their unemployment compensation law. And actually, to make it even worse, back in 2007, both the House and the Senate unanimously voted to repeal the Social Security offset as it pertains to unemployment compensation benefits. So they're actually putting that piece back into the law when it only equals about $12 million a year.
Okay.
Chump change in the grand scheme of things.
Right. Well, the bottom line here is they're putting the burden of this on people that are newly unemployed. They're going to put the burden on this, and the economy, while we were in this recovery, the stock market's been uneven. There's certainly signs that there's layoffs happening continuously, and the amount agreed to, we believe the Full Employment Council, the Miami Valley Full Employment Council, we believe there needs to be a safety net that protects you until you get a job. Not for, if they have a job for you, fine. But if they're going to kick you off and there's no job for you, that is that's an aggressive act, a nonviolent aggressive act that is crippling people.
Yeah, well, you
might as well rob them with a gun.
Right. Well, you just mentioned kicking you off the job, right? Let's look at that again. The steel workers out in Louisville, Ohio. They work for ATI. They have been illegally locked out for several months, and the only thing that's been keeping them afloat, unemployment compensation benefits. So what does this bill do for those hardworking men and women? Well, this bill actually says that if you are locked out by an employer and those men and women wanted to go back and work on a continuing contract, it happens all the time.
Sure, right.
But the employer actually said, nope, that's it. We're going to cut off contract negotiations. You all need to get out of the plant. You can't come back in. This bill actually says that those workers would be disqualified from receiving unemployment compensation. Through no fault of it, they want to go back to work. And not only is ATI, the employer, turning their backs on these workers, but now the state of Ohio is going to turn its back on these workers as well. They want to go back to work. That's all they want to do. So it's just absolutely absurd that they would go after, this very vulnerable population during, a very low point in their lives. Those men and women want to work. I talked to them this morning. They want to go back to work. The NLRB actually ruled that the current lockout in Louisville was illegal. Yet they're going to run out of their unemployment compensation benefits on February 14th. What a Valentine's Day gift, Oh, sorry
Sure,
guys.
well,
even though you're illegally locked out from your plant, even though you want to go back to work, we're not going to give you any kind of assistance at all.
Now, have they been locked out 26 weeks, or have they been?
So it's going on 24 or 23 weeks.
Okay, so they themselves will not be directly affected, but a future lockout
Yeah, I'm just using them as the example
we
because
had
it's
the
something
same,
going on right now.
And they've done this over and over again. You have this background in coal miners. During the great coal mine strike into the 70s, early 80s, they took away the food stamps from, and that was the only thing that was keeping, after being on strike for 6 weeks, 8 weeks at that point, which is a historical coal mine strike. They broke that strike by taking away food stamps. And so they'll use the safety net and to push people into the corner where you don't have food to feed your family.
Right.
And that's the kind of greed we have in America. Right. People want to know why the 1% is despised by people who are paying attention is because they're thieves. They have gotten rich squeezing money out of poor people, working people, and the middle class.
Right, and the question really becomes, how much is enough? How much is enough? You saw the charts. It's astronomical how much the 1% actually owns, how much wealth they actually own. How much is enough? And this is just another example of this bill, House Bill 394, is another example of the the business community saying, we need some more.
Sure. Well, that's part of the problem with the way the system's set up. The system is set up it's a game of Monopoly.
Yeah.
And with the banks and credit and the way it's set up, they borrow money and they have to pay it back. And the only way they can pay it back is by squeezing workers. And so it's not just that they're pocketing all that money. The system is set up so it's a big funnel.
Right.
And after so many years, the funnel gets bigger and they have to suck up more and more of the people's benefits, living standard, and they push you back into serfdom.
Right. And you and I aren't the ones with the top hat and the monocle.
Nope. Well, we got glasses, but this is part of a whole. I mean, this is just one thing. This is happening all over the country in different ways, to different workers. Whether it's I told you about the school teachers in Detroit trying to get a better deal for the students and themselves, but they're squeezing them. They're squeezing them for water and Flint. We have charter schools that are breaking the teachers union. Dayton's real big. We have a whole bunch of charter schools, and the people that are teaching there, they deserve a job and stuff, but they're making half of what a regular teacher makes, and they don't have any protection on the job at all.
Right, and it's just a continued, unfortunately, this governor has had, a privatization mindset from the get-go since he was, elected. And we're seeing more, more privatization all over the state. Just recently on OSU's campus, they privatized the parking garages. So parking attendants, at OSU have been replaced by machines. They're currently talking about a lot more privatization on OSU's campus and college campuses all over the state.
Sure. Well, we talked earlier about the adjuncts. They have, instead of having full professors and having a decent living as a professor, now they have all these adjuncts. They're making a couple $1,000s teaching a class, if that sometimes.
Right.
And
for the adjuncts, they're driving from college to college to college, just trying to cobble together some kind of living.
Sure. And then the tuitions that the kids pay, they're paying an astronomical amount of money to go to college, and that money, instead of going to a professor so they get a really top-notch education, they're and not that the adjuncts don't give good education,
right.
but they need to be paid and have benefits themselves.
Right, and the kids who do make it through and graduate, they're coming out with record debt that this country hasn't seen in a really, really long time. It takes 10, 15, 20 years into their career to pay off that debt.
Oh, sometimes longer.
Sometimes longer, absolutely. And it's just another way that hardworking men and women in this state are really getting squeezed.
Okay, well, we're going to broaden this out because it's, like I said, it's part of a whole orchestrated thing. We've seen it in Wisconsin, we've seen it in Michigan, we've seen it in the traditional unionized states. And we had the whole issue too here in Ohio, and actually people around the country look to us as we're like fighting back and winning,
Right.
at least a little bit.
Right. Well, and you said fighting back. We need people's help to fight back on this unemployment bill, House Bill 394. So I'm hoping that maybe your viewers can write down this phone number real quick and give it a call. It's 1-844-213-8172. Again, that's 844-213-8172. Hopefully you'll be able to put it up on the screen.
Yeah, there it is. It's let's repeat it again. So call and get involved in this. This is a hotline you guys are operating.
Yep, it's an unemployment hotline. If you call in, it gives you a little bit of a message, and then you just type in your zip code, and you actually get connected to your legislator, and you can tell them to oppose House Bill 394. And the real message is to not only oppose the bill, but kill the bill. We need to scrap this bill, and then we need business and we need labor and the legislature to come together and come to a fair and balanced compromise. Because this bill is so unfair and so unbalanced that it's just really the wrong way to do business. And historically speaking, business and labor, when problems arise in either workers' compensation or unemployment compensation, when problems arise within those systems, the Ohio AFL CIO and the business community come together in a room and come to some sort of compromise, and really share the sacrifice. Because in this bill right now, the business community is not sharing in that sacrifice. They're trying to solve Ohio's insolvency problems solely on the backs of workers, and that's just not right.
Absolutely. Well, we like I say, our group really appreciates that the unions and the groups here started to stand up on this, because unemployment is still a massive problem in this country and here in the Miami Valley. Like I was saying, this is part of a whole orchestrated attack on working people. I mean, and if you would have said 10 years ago would have gotten like this, no one would have believed you. I mean, the unions are a pillar of
A democracy.
democracy in our society.
Yeah.
And so the whole notion that they're breaking the unions, and it's going to be in front of the Supreme Court here on the public workers, but here in Ohio, they have several other things that they have on the back burner they're going to maybe put, including making Ohio a right-to-work state, right?
Yes. So, every General Assembly, someone introduces a right-to-work bill in Ohio. And this General Assembly is no different. Tom Brinkman, who is a legislator, a House member from the Cincinnati area, he introduced House Bill 377 not too long ago, and that is Ohio's right-to-work bill for the private sector. Now, as you know, Logan, right-to-work is wrong. It's wrong for Dayton. It's wrong for its workers. It's wrong for Ohio. It's wrong for all of us. What right-to-work laws actually do is make you and I and all the workers around this state poorer, It makes it harder for us to have a voice on the job. There's a 36% higher death rate on the job in states that are right to work. And we've recently seen things that I never thought would happen. We saw Michigan go right to work, home of the auto workers and the UAW. That state went right to work. Indiana went right to work. Just yesterday in West Virginia, a right-to-work bill was introduced there. There was a really big rally on the Capitol there in Charleston just to say the same thing, which is right-to-work is wrong. In these states that have went right to work, people are poorer, they're less safe, and they just have less of a voice on the job. They're not freer.
Sure. Well, the notion is we're a free society, but you go to work and the Bill of Rights is out the window. You have no protection unless you have a contract with a union, or if you're a very skilled worker, you can have an individual contract. But without that contract, you're at the whim of the worker. You could, the boss.
Right.
And the boss can fire you. He could, you've probably all had very nice bosses, but I've worked at several places which were, you might as well have been on a slave ship or something, because the boss was abusive. They expect you to do dangerous stuff, and they expect you to, I don't mind working hard. I like working hard because the day goes quicker.
Right.
But to where they're breathing down your neck and making you feel bad, and that doesn't happen a lot on jobs, but it does happen.
It does. It does.
And the only way you have protection in a society is where you have an institution like a union that's going to step up.
Right, it's going to step up and let your voice be heard at the workplace. One of the arguments that Tom Brinkman and others use is, no one should have to join a union. Well, the fact is that anyone who says this is just misinformed. No one in Ohio is forced to join a union. That's just not how it works. And it's a really deceptive phrase, Logan. Right to work. Doesn't it sound good? I mean, everybody should have the right to work.
Well, we believe everybody has a right to a job.
Right. And in this case, it's really, if something like this passes, what I like to say is it's no rights at work. Again, right to work is wrong, and for them to push this stuff to make people poorer or to widen that inequality gap, from the video that we saw earlier, it's just not the right thing to do. Even our own governor in West Virginia a few months back said that Ohio is doing fine. Ohio doesn't need a right to work bill to pass. He even went as far as saying that businesses, when they come to him, they don't even mention right to work as one of the qualifications or one of the criteria for them to decide where they're going to move their plant or their new operation. It's just not needed in the state.
I don't trust the governor. So, I mean, he might have said that publicly, and maybe he's trying to get elected or something, but...
He is really busy right now.
But his track record on back on the contract on America, I don't know if you remember that, but he was a big pusher
with Newt Gingrich.
With Newt Gingrich, but they cut welfare, they built prisons, they deregulated the banks, and all that stuff that really got us to the Great Recession. He was on the ground level pushing all those pitfalls out there. And so he'll say anything to get some votes, but we know we've had a worker tell me from the local glass plant that they're telling workers that are applying there that they don't want a union there. And so I don't know, he worked on that, bringing that plan in here, and I don't know if he has something to do with that, but that's what they're telling people that are applying there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he goes that far into the actual workings of the plant. He was a part. Him and Jobs Ohio was a part of bringing that plant to Ohio. But back to right to work, just really quick. Another one of their arguments is right to work creates jobs, and from Indiana to Michigan to Oklahoma and all the states who have recently went right to work, that's just not the case. We've seen manufacturing jobs actually leaving those states. We've seen employers leaving those states. So this idea that if we pass a right to work bill in the state of Ohio that all these jobs are going to rain down on top of us, it's just not true. It's just not true.
Well, I know the unions have been really out on the forefront on this, and we have the rally. A number of us went up to that rally that happened in Columbus, but we have a little clip of that, and we want to show that to give people a sense that there is a fight back.
Yes.
And there's a mobilization, and people, we say it on this show, you got to be an active citizen.
You do.
Because you can watch the whole thing go down on television, and the country's going down the tubes. People's rights, the whole nature, the tenor of things is very scary for people if you're paying attention.
Yeah, and we've, on the right to work question, we, the Ohio AFL-CIO, has actually partnered up with We Are Ohio. You probably remember We Are Ohio from 2011 when we all came together and fought back against Senate Bill 5, Issue 2, and won resoundingly. So we've partnered with We Are Ohio, who's still around, in order to go out to the communities and really talk about right to work and why it's wrong for those communities. We've been to Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati, Youngstown. I mean, even small places like Lima and Portsmouth, Ohio, and Athens, Ohio. We've went all over the state for the last 3 or 4 years, really talking to communities about why right to work is wrong for that community. And that's work that we're going to continue to do. again, in partnership with We Are Ohio. So you mentioned the clip that we're getting ready to play, the Koch brothers. I think you're pretty familiar with the Koch brothers.
Sure.
They're one of the groups that are really pushing this right to work thing all over the country. And they decided to hold their summer summit in Columbus, Ohio last August, and we just thought it wasn't a good idea to let them come to our backyard and not have a little bit of a response for them. So I think you're going to see a little bit of that in the clip here.
All right, well, our group has organized lots of demonstrations, and we were there at this one supporting the union.
Thank you so much.
So let's, if we could run the rally clip, we'd like to see the people on the streets, because it's what it's going to take.
That's what it's going to take to fight back.
We have got to make sure that politicians understand that an attack on one worker is an attack on all workers. These are the voices of real people who work hard, play by the rules, are looking for a fair shake and a shot at the American dream.
We're going to march over there. We're going to tell the Americans for Prosperity Conference that our American dream is not for sale. Now, my thanks to all the workers, the service workers, the manufacturing workers, the education workers, the transportation workers, the public sector workers, the food and commercial workers, the communication workers, the hotel workers, the construction workers, the office workers. My thanks to all workers who are here today.
You see, it's only when working people speak up and together demand change. Change so the rules work for us, our families, and all working people. Then the American dream can be realized. It's working people that built this country, keep us safe, connect us all, and balance the economy. And we're here today to say that's our American dream, and it's not for sale.
Speak up together. Take on the corporate CEOs who are rigging the system for their benefit, and let working people share in the wealth that we're creating.
The corporate CEOs want us to believe that the new normal that we will be entering means low wages, low benefits, and no say at work. We are not going to accept this new normal.
In Ohio, you know that right to work is not good for your community. What is good for us is a strong union presence in every community in this country. And when you beat down this right to work legislation, you will set an agenda for all of America.
The American dream was never handed to us. We fought for it, we've earned it, and we've lived it. Are you here to defend your American dream? Let me ask you again. Are you here to defend your American dream? I thought so.
If it were not for you, there would be no buses. If it were not for you, there would be no restaurants. If it were not for you, there would be no hotels. If it were not for you, there would be no cabs. If it were not for you, there would be no electricians. If it were not for you, this country would not be what it is. How dare they?
Yeah, well, defending the American dream, we need to fight to win the American dream, because a lot of our poorer people in our community here have never had the American dream, and have been off and on unemployed their whole lives, or been marginal employees. This whole, Matt, we really appreciate you being on the show here and stuff, and the work you're doing fighting for these benefits. We need to really reach deep down and get people involved all over the state. And we really want to stand with the unions and the other community groups and build a kind of network and coalition that's going to win in the long run.
Yeah.
We want people to call their representatives, so let's put that number back up there, Matt.
Yeah. We appreciate being here tonight, and we really need your viewers' help to push back on this unemployment bill. And if they could just call 1-844-213-8172, and they'll be prompted to put in their zip code and be connected to their legislators. And just let your legislator know, hey, we oppose House Bill 394. It's not the right thing for Ohioans. And also to scrap the bill and have business and labor go in a room and come to a compromise. That's what we need people to say.
Sure, right. Well, we like we say, we're for jobs for everyone. We're for a safety net to protect people all the time. And unemployment benefits is a critical component of that safety net, part of the New Deal. So we also have, like I said, we had John Conyers here. We want to show at least a couple minutes of John Conyers' town hall meeting.
Great job on the town halls, by the way. I was in Columbus, and it was just a fantastic event. My boss, President Tim Berga, really enjoyed the event, and Conyers is a legend.
Yeah,
so
well,
thank you for all your work on that. I know it was a hard job.
Well, we appreciate Tim and you being there, and Tim did a great job, and we tell him we thank him for that.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's cue up that tape for a minute, and we'll be back to wrap this up. But get involved, get out there. Don't sit back and let history run us over here. We've got to stand up to these greedy, selfish people who've taken over our country and turn this around.
Call your legislators.
All right, got that number. So here's a bit of the town hall meeting that took place in Dayton.
You who know me, you know that the one single top domestic priority is for this, the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, that the United States become a full employment sponsor of jobs for everybody in the country. And that should be our number one domestic goal. That seems simple and obvious. And what we will be doing is building up support for it and understanding for it everywhere I go in the United States. We want this country to officially go on record, and I'm working on some things to get back to the outgoing number 44, the President of the United States, to help lead and continue this legacy of the simple economic goal of jobs for everybody in America. And so we still need over 3 million jobs to get back to reach the so-called pre-recession 2008 levels. In many urban and rural pockets of our country, including parts of my district in Detroit, the unemployment rate is still hovering at around 24 to 26% unemployment. And I don't need to remind you that people of color suffer far worse unemployment because our rate of unemployment is 9.4%, nearly double the average unemployment rate. And in Ohio, African American unemployment is 3.3 times higher than it is for whites. And so for this reason, brothers and sisters, I've introduced a number of bills that will help return America to full employment. My key measure, and I have 39 co-sponsors, my signature bill is H.R. 1000.
Now, the single most important thing you need to understand in order to understand why H.R. 1000 is structured the way it is that it's predicated on the assumption that access to a decent job is a human right. And I'm going to say that again because it's very, very important if this movement is going to succeed that people begin to think of this as a human rights struggle. We need to secure the right to a decent job along with the right to health care, education, and adequate income support for people who can't support themselves. It's a full panoply of human rights, and it's our task to make sure that the United States secures them. Like other human rights, government has a duty to secure the right to work, the right to a decent job. And H.R. 1000 is designed to do that. It is designed to secure the right to a decent job in the United States. Now, how would it do that? Here the story gets a little complicated, but not too complicated, because the job creation strategy that H.R. 1000 would deploy is not the strategy that most people associate with progressive job creation initiative.
Okay, that was Phil Harvey with the National Jobs for All Coalition at our town hall meeting. We got a little feedback here, but we really appreciate, Matt, you being here, and we really want to work closely fighting this bill. Our members and the workers of Ohio depend on unemployment benefits and this safety net.
No, thank you, Logan, for having us tonight, and for your viewers. Call your legislators, be involved, and most importantly, vote.
Yep.
Vote.
Well, we're going to be mobilizing here in Dayton around the unemployment benefits. We're going to be fighting also for jobs. H.R. 1000 that Representative Conyers talked about, we believe you have to be two-fisted. Fight for the here and now and fight for a vision of the future.
Absolutely.
So the Miami Valley Full Employment Council, the AFL-CIO says, be an active citizen. Get involved in our community. We need everybody to pitch in.
Got to have boots on the ground.
Absolutely. So get out there and be with us. And we'll see you next month.
Thanks, Logan.